Hello, welcome back to Behind the Faders, the live sound channel. Today I want to tell you a story. But before we get to that, if you like watching these videos and this channel and you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. It's free for you, doesn't cost you anything, and it's so helpful for me. Also, if you feel like you want to support this channel even a little bit more, maybe give me a super thanks for Christmas. Okay, this story is about the worst day in my career, really, and why I consider it my second birthday. The reason behind telling you the story is if you really want to become a touring sound engineer or a touring technician in general, there's more to that than just knowing the technical stuff and having the right mindset to make a career. It's a lifestyle. I mean, of course, and obviously part of that lifestyle is you travel a lot more than most other people. And traveling is sometimes a dangerous thing. Most of my subscribers live in the States, so I'm not sure how familiar you are with the genre called Eurodance. Eurodance was big in the 90s. It was always a male rapper and a female singer. And one of the biggest acts in this genre back then was La Bouche. La Bouche were Melanie Thornton and Lane McRae, both Americans living in Germany. And they had some massive hits. The producer behind it was Frank Farian, one of the biggest producers Germany ever had. And of course, these acts would normally do like half playback shows or even full playback shows. But La Bouche liked to do shows with a band every once in a while. And that's how I came into the picture, because the monitor engineer, who was also the technical director of the whole project, was a friend of mine. So he invited me in to do front of house for band shows. And once I got into that, I also handled some of the half playback shows as well. And we even played some shows in the States. So there must be some awareness for this genre. For example, we had a very interesting show scheduled for Washington that we didn't do in the end, but that's a different story and another video. So in 2000, Melanie Thornton left La Bouche to start a solo career, and we both went with her. In 2001, she released her solo album called Ready to Fly, which was a good success. So then she started doing shows again, and like I said, we went with her, and it was pretty successful. So we got to play some big shows supporting Tom Jones on his big open air tour in Germany. And she started doing half playback shows again as well. And the system that we had for covering all this was, there was still her technical director, name is Stefan, let's just call him Steven. And he did monitors on the band shows, and I was second in line. I would jump in whenever he wasn't available, and I would do front of house for the band shows. And for the half playback shows, it would be obviously her and a tour manager and one of us. But there were shows where we both couldn't make it. We both weren't available. So Stephen hired a third guy who would step in when we both couldn't do it. And by the way, the reason that we stayed with Melanie was that she was the sweetest person on the planet. She was so helpful and supporting to us. She would, for example, when we flew somewhere, she would check us in with her senator status, so we didn't have to wait in line for the economy check-in. Sometimes she would hire both of us, front of house and monitors, just for a half playback show, because she just enjoyed hanging out with us. And when she got in ears at a point, she then even started learning about frequencies. So she could tell us, can you reduce 2.5K a little bit? It's a little bit harsh. And we were hanging out with her a lot before the show. And of course, we had dinner together. And we knew pretty much everything about her personal life. And so it was more friendship than just a work relationship. So just to make that clear. And a funny thing about this third person, whom I never met, was then whenever he stepped in for us, it would be a double show day. Never happened to us, always only to him. So whenever he had a day with Melanie, he would always make double money. And we started joking about that, of course. Then in November of 2001, she released a Christmas single called Wonderful Dreams. And that thing exploded. It was a big, big hit. Until this day, this song is used every year during the Christmas season by Coca-Cola on their television commercials. In different forms, but it's still that song ever since 2001. So it was a massive hit. And of course, she promoted that with gigs. Now, on the 24th of November 2001, there was another double show day. And of course, Stephen and I were both not available. So the third guy did it. In my case, I couldn't do it because I had a big corporate show for Mercedes-Benz in a town called Sindelfingen in Germany. And I had to say, look, Melanie, I can't give away an entire week of work for one day, even though it is a double paid day. And she was always, like always, she understood it. My show with Mercedes was on the same day than her show day, 24th of November. On the 25th of November, our audio crew had a day off. Because after the show, we cleared front of house and everything, and the next day there was so much work for the carpenters before we could get to anything to load it out. So production decided to give us a day off and then come back in the next day and then start working. So next morning, I wake up because my phone is ringing pretty early in the morning. And it's Stephen on the other end, and he's in tears. And I said, what happened? And he said, did you hear about that plane crash? That's Crossair Flight that crashed into the woods right before the landing strip. And I said, no. Yeah, too bad, but do you know who was on that flight? And then I realized, Melanie, and the tour manager, and that sound engineer. And that was one of the biggest shocks in my life. And so we cried together a little, we talked about it, and then we hung up because we both wanted to follow what was reported about that crash. Because by that time, it wasn't really clear if Melanie died on that crash or maybe she survived. We didn't know anything. So the next thing that I did was I called my mum. And at that point, I hadn't even realized how close I was to have been on that flight. It just didn't cross my mind. And I told my mom, and then she brought that up. And that was the first time I realized that. So, and then news rolled in. It was pretty clear after a while that Melanie was dead, and didn't know about the other guys. But at the end, I think 9 people survived that crash, but none of them were amongst them. So then I didn't really know what to do with myself. Maybe you can relate to that. I had a day off in a little town, not really much to do, and I needed to distract myself because I was in shock. So in situations like that, sometimes people do strange things. So I ended up going to the movies and watched the first Harry Potter movie. And after 3 hours, I came out of the cinema, I switched on my phone, and it had like 35 unanswered messages. And everybody I called back was like, oh. So the news had spread about that plane crash, and so a lot of people that I know, a lot of my friends and family, were afraid that I was on that flight, of course. So 2 days later or so, her sister, who was also her manager, contacted us and invited us to the funeral. This is the invitation. December 8, 2001. So we flew to Mount Pleasant in South Carolina, and we attended the funeral, and we met all her family. Really, really great family. And the next day we flew back, went to my place and put the black suits on again and had to drive to Bremen, like an hour drive to attend the funeral of that tour manager who had also become a close friend to us. I didn't attend the funeral of that sound engineer because, like I said, I never met the guy. Right after the funeral, my phone rang. And it was the company I was mostly working for back then. And they said, can you take over a tour from tomorrow because their sound engineer got really sick, he needs to get home. And I said, yeah, of course. And the weird thing was, the first show that I went to take over that tour was in Sindelfingen. So I had to go back to the town where I was when I got the news about Melanie's death. And it was a hard tour because, like I said, Wonderful Dreams became a massive hit, of course, fueled even more by this tragedy. It wasn't a nightliner tour, it was a tour where we used hotels. So every night when I got to my hotel room and switched on the television, at some point there would be a Coca-Cola commercial with her song. And so I cried a lot on that tour. And it took me a long time to get over that. That's the story about my second birthday. I see you around.